This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. I raise this glass for the ones who die meaninglessly and the newborns who get fed intravenously. Somebody's mama caught a job and a welfare fraud case. When she sleeps, she swear it feel like plastic around her face. Lights turned off. This the third month the rent is late. Thoughts of being homeless, crying till you hyperventilate. Despair permeates the air, sets in your hair. The kids play with that one toy they learned how to share. Coming home don't ever seem to be a celebration. Bills stay piled up on the coffee table like they decoration. Heaping spoons of peanut butter, big ass glass of water. Make the hunger subside. Save the real food for your daughter. You feel like swinging haymakers at a moving truck. You feel like laughing so it seems like you don't give a fuck. You feel like getting so high you smoke the whole damn crop. You feel like crying, but you think that you might never stop. Homes with no heat stiffen your joints like arthritis. If this was fiction, it'd be easier to write this. Some folks try to front like they so above you. They tear this motherfucker up if they really loved you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. There's certain tricks of the trade to try to halt your defeat, like taking Tupperware to an all-you-can-eat, returning used shit for new saying you lost your receipt, and writing 4-figure checks when your accounts deplete. Then all your problems pile up about a mile up. Think about a partner you could dial up to help you out this vile stuff. Whole family sleeping on the futon while you clipping coupons, eating salad, trying to get full off the croutons. Across town, the situation is identical. Somebody getting strangled by the system and its tentacles. Misconceptions raise questions to be solved. A lot of dope boys is broke. A lot of homeless got jobs. You can make 8 bones an hour till you pass out and still be ass out. Most pyramid schemes don't let you cash out. They say this generation made the harmony break. But crime rise consistent with the poverty rate. You take the workers from jobs, you gon' have murders and mobs. A gang of preachers screaming sermons over murmurs and sobs, saying, pray for a change from the Lord above you. They tear this motherfucker up if they really loved you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. You like this song because it's relatable. It's you in the rhyme. We go to stores that only let us in 2 at a time. We live in places where it costs to get your check cash. Arguments about money usually drown out the tech blast. Work 6 days a week, can't sleep Saturdays though. Muscles trembling like a pager when the battery's low. And you still don't know where the years went. Although every single shift feel like a year spent. And you could write your resume, but it wouldn't even mention all the life lessons learned during 6 years of detention. And how you learned the police was just some handicappers on the ground next to broken glass and candy wrappers. So don't accept my collects on the phone. Just hit me back at the house so I know I ain't alone. And we could chop it up about this fucked up system. Homies that's been killed, how we always gonna miss them. It's almost impossible surviving on this fraction. Sip a 40 to the brain for the chemical reaction. You gotta hustle because they trying to push and shove you. Tear this motherfucker up since I really love you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog. Me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. I was asked to do a couple acapellas, so I'll do another one. Every death is an abrupt one. Every cop is a corrupt one if you ain't got no cash up in the trust fund. Every cat with a gat want to bust one. Every guest want a +1. Every tenement's a penitent. So every tried man is innocent. Time served should be the sentence spent. Everybody want to hit a lick. Every one of y'all is getting pimped. Every time I spit, I'm finna rip. Every cancer is a homicide. Every boss better run and hide. Every human is some kinder black. Every visa got a pin to crack. Every verse is from the cardiac. Every search is involuntary. Every inmate want commissary. Every banknote is promissory. Every broke motherfucker finna form a gang, and when we come, we taking everything. Every Mac want a Cadillac. Every Mark want they Skrilla back. Every knock want to hit a crack in a park or a Pontiac, where every little sin is to the rent, and every roach is a resident. Every truth ain't evident. Every slave story present tense. Every uprise a consequence. Every time it be something sweet. Every banker is a fucking thief. Everybody better holler with me. Every fiend need $1.50. Every crime that I did was petty. Every criminal is rich already. Every landlord got a complex. Every single is a bomb threat. Every sellout mayor hate my verse. Everybody, they gonna get it first. Every broke motherfucker finna form a gang. And when we come, we taking everything. I do this last one. This one is a quicker one. Listen to the Shotgun Sonata. Wait, how does it go? Okay, here we go. Listen to the Shotgun Sonata from Personas Non Grata with the, I don't even know that one, never mind. No, I do it one more time. The third time is hard. Listen to the Shotgun Sonata from Personas Non Grata with a plot to rock harder than the second intifada. I do drink fire water, but I'm more like higher water and will slaughter, slaughter, slaughter your armada. Inform your scholars that our alma mater squalor, so my squatter pull your collar at your black and white gala. With cannon fodder for dollars, both under Bush and Obama. I'm not a baller, I'm a brawler, calling y'all to come harder. I'm from the land of the free labor that planted the planet of black and branded to scram it over to Canada. A fan of radical bandits and bandanas who slamming the banana clip and rat-a-tat-tatted the day spat, the grammar to scam y'all to clamor up. The damn ladder to grab for Excalibur, not a rap battler, but the next caliber. Catch the program, not just the pentameter. All right. So, a lot of the songs that I do, no matter, you know, how humorous or sad or, you know, ridiculous or violent or whatever, I think a lot of what I hope to put in it, now I'm not necessarily always successful, what I hope to put in it is a sense of optimism. Not just a sense that things are messed up, because we kind of all have that sense that we don't like the way things are. Probably on whatever political spectrum you are, a lot of people don't like the way things are. So that's not my point, it's just to say that things are messed up. But my point is to say that there is a way to change it. And that puts optimism into my music. And that comes from a certain analysis that I have that has to do with how power actually works. And on the basis level, most people can agree with the idea that the people with the money have the power. There's nobody being like, no, actually the poor people have the power. Nobody thinks that, no matter what side of the political spectrum they're on. They know that the people with the money have the power. And that our political system is secondary. Our electoral system is secondary to the actual economic system that we're in. Because the economic system is what creates which groups are the rich people and who's not, in that very small group that are the rich people. And so that gives a certain optimism that gives me a device of thinking of how things may change. And unfortunately, that device, which is known as a class analysis, is not necessarily even given much on the left anymore. abandon class analysis and abandon class struggle in a big way. We talk about many problems that are going on in this society without talking about getting rid of capitalism. And it presents certain problems because when you don't talk about the need for class struggle, then you end up not talking about our power base. Because our power base, we have a power base in this system even though we don't have any money. And that power base is the fact that we are the people that create the profit. We are the people that work in the businesses that make the profit. And so therefore, without us, it can't happen. But we don't struggle for social change based on that power base anymore. And so you end up having demonstrations with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people where people are out there and like, yeah, we're against this. Now what? We have all these people out here. How do we turn this into what gives us power? Is it just being out here on the street, showing people that we don't like this? Or what is it what's the next step? And often being on both sides of those questions, organizers don't have the answer. And the truth is because of that same problem that we've abandoned actual class struggle. That doesn't mean, class struggle doesn't mean don't work on anything else, but it means that if you're going to have social change, you have to have a basis of power from which to demand, to exact that change. And this is only the left in the last 40 years. It hasn't always been this way. There was a time in the 20s and 30s where in the United States, in places in the United States, there was 1 million card-carrying communists, meaning people that said, we want to change the whole way this system is, and people that were legally in a particular party. And not to even talk about all the folks that supported them. And at this time, the reason why there were so many people that were dedicated to actually changing the whole system is not because of sheer poverty, because we know that poverty doesn't breed resistance. Got a lot of impoverished people without resistance happening, and that happens all the time. But the thing that changed, the thing that was different, was that radicals organized on the job. And not only organized on the job, but organized work stoppages and strikes around wages, but not only around that, but saying that, hey, this is around wages, we want to get more wages, but we're organizing for a larger thing. And there were militant mining strikes in Alabama and Utah and Montana and Colorado, and there were occupations of factories all around here. And all of these states around here, many of these states were called hotbeds of communist activity by J. Edgar Hoover. Now, what does that mean? That means that the grandparents of the folks that are now right-wing Republicans were communists in many cases. Well, what happened? How did that change? Well, a number of things happened. Well, first, because of all of that radical activity, we got the biggest liberal reform in the history of the United States, which was the New Deal. There was revolutions going on all over the world at that time. There was 1 million card-carrying communists. There were people taking over factories and things like that. And while it wasn't yet really a revolutionary movement, it was definitely the beginnings of something that was feared to be able to turn that way. And in that scene, in that era, is the time when we had the New Deal, which brought us the things that people say they're happy about the U.S. for, besides let's say the supposed freedom of speech and things like that. But after that era, radicals went underground. And the reason why was because of Hitler. The radicals in the US wanted the United States to join the fight against Hitler. So they created, so all around the world there was the United Front Against Fascism. And there was a call for radicals in the US to not challenge the United States during this time so that they could win, so that they could help the other countries who had already been fighting to win against Hitler. So this made people go underground for a number of years, meaning they all of a sudden went from being radical organizers and organizing these strikes and work stoppages and in different areas and in farmlands and things like that, to saying, hey, we're just, we just want a greater democratic society, and kind of went underground. And at the same time, there was an attack inside the unions and those workspaces to get radicals out. Well, them being underground for so long really set a precedence and set it up for there being the House Un-American Activities Committee in the McCarthy era, where they went around and said, hey, this person is a radical, this person is a revolutionary, and they've been lying to you all this time. And it felt like some cloak and dagger sort of shit. Whereas 20 years before, they wouldn't have been able to do that, because they'd be like, no shit, he's a revolutionary. That's why we did this strike, because he talked about how this system works and how we can bring you to your knees. But this was a different time that followed this period of being underground, and it allowed there to be, a retreat from labor work, and there also to be this attack, and it broke up, and that, along with revelations about what had happened in the Soviet Union with Stalin, broke up the biggest radical organization, the biggest revolutionary organization in the United States, which was at the time the Communist Party. That split up into a bunch of different groups in the 50s that became, in the 60s, the New Left. The New Left took things a little differently than what had happened in the 20 years before, and they said, we're going to be out with who we are. We're radicals, we're revolutionaries. But they also, and that was a really good thing. But one of the other things it did was it decided to focus on cities and students, and actually physically moved people from areas like this to bigger cities, and focused on students. And what this called for, and besides the moving physically of people, what it actually also did by focusing on students, at this time you started hearing for the first time, the students are the revolution, which wasn't historically accurate. Like, it hadn't been really the case in the past. There was something going on in China at the time, which was really students kind of rebelling against Mao and saying, we want what you promised, and but that wasn't really the history of revolution, was students forming revolution. And this was something that really you heard repeated over and over back at that time. But the focus on students meant you couldn't focus on withholding labor. You couldn't focus on, because it didn't work in the same way. You could have a student strike. My parents were part of the San Francisco State strike of the 60s, but it's not the same thing. You're not just totally stopping profit. And so it made for a different view on what we were doing. Whereas in the 20s, a demonstration was just that. What is it demonstrating? It's demonstrating the power. We've got 100,000 people on the street that will shut down your factory because we're organized at work. We're not just meeting up because we all agree with the same thing. Everybody in this workspace agrees with it, and we can shut you down. It was a demonstration of power. In the 60s, the demonstration became the be-all, end-all. For the most part, I'm using really broad general swipes, and I'm not footnoting anything, and there's all sorts of exceptions to what I'm saying, but I'm just talking about a general sense of movement here. So the demonstration, getting people out on the street, became the thing where the left was saying, hey, you need to get your voice out. Get on the street and be heard. Listen to, let people hear that you don't like the way things are, and that will be the change. the left actually put this out in many different ways, that all of a sudden the change was letting your voice be heard, which really was selling the idea that democracy works. It was really selling the idea that, hey, if enough people say they don't like something, the powers that be will listen. And those powers that be will do something about it. And we've been selling people a bill of goods that isn't real, because we've stepped away from our power base. So we have a lot of movements that come up, and we get to this place where we're finding it hard to recruit more people. A lot of people know about different things that happen, and we try to get them involved, and they're like, yeah, but what is marching going to do? And when I've been asked that, usually you're trying to get somebody there, and you talk about that step, like, hey, we do need, and it's true, we do need to have people out there saying what they're going to do. But the question is, how are we telling people that power works? How are we telling people that they are going to make a change if we don't actually start organizing on the job? Like, not just organizing at 6 o'clock when everybody's off work, not just doing a demonstration downtown on Saturday when everybody is convenient for the few people that agree with each other, but to actually organize on the job with the people that might not agree with you because they're only there because they're also getting a paycheck. That's a harder thing, and that's something we haven't done in so long that it sounds like a wild idea. It shouldn't be sounding like a wild idea. It should be something like we got, oh, I know someone, this person, that person that does it. Because while there are a few people organizing unions, one, there's only 7% of the population is in a union. Two, the folks that are running those unions right now, they don't have an agenda of social change. They're not radicals for the most part. There's some radicals working in these spaces and trying to get it more radical, but those unions are not radical. And they're focusing on the areas that have traditionally been unionized. Now, I'm talking to a bunch of students, a lot of them, and teachers. So why am I talking about this necessity? Because that is part of how we teach how the world works, right? We teach how the world works by how we organize ourselves, not just by saying that it does this, and then organize in a different way. And it is my thought that radical organizations, that students that even aren't yet in an organization need to look into. If you're deciding that you want to be part of social change, what we need now more than ever are radicals organizing a power base in the working class, because that's the only way we're going to have some leverage, and that's the only way our demands are going to be met. Now, it's easy to go from the reason why. So it's funny because right now I think that me saying that radical left should join the workforce and organize on the job sounds a lot more drastic than saying that the left should vote for Bernie Sanders. And the reason that sounds a lot more drastic is because it's all been going, it's all along the same line since the 60s, that it's not that big of a jump to say, hey, organizing and radical movements are all about getting people on the streets to let their voice be heard, with no sense of how the system works and how you control and how you control the ruling class. How do you make the ruling class have to negotiate with you? That's the same thing as saying, let's elect someone and they can let our voice be heard. And they'll beg the ruling class for changes. Because really, if we don't have, it doesn't really, in my mind, you can elect Che Guevara. And Che Guevara is going to have to make similar concessions that everyone from, Kennedy to Obama to whoever is the next president would have to make, because this is how power works. Elected officials, no matter what their intention are the puppets. The puppet masters are those who control purse strings. Now, in Bernie's case, he's not taking super PAC money. But the thing is, how does the system work? It's not just one. If it was only a personality contest, then someone could take money for an election from someone and then defy the people that gave him the money, because then he could just do whatever, or she could do whatever they wanted to do once they were in office. But the thing is that we know that the main power contradiction in this system is between the folks that own everything and the folks that create the profit. And that those folks, and the folks that own everything, are the folks that control how things work in the electoral system. So if we want to control those things, if we want to even make reforms in that, we have to pose enough of a threat to profit and to the way this system works to even get some of those things. And I propose that the first step is organizations making a concerted effort to SALT, meaning sending people into places to organize, and to organize withholding of labor around doing that. If we're not addressing that, then we don't have a serious plan for social change. I'll just leave it there, because I was told to not keep talking.
All right, so at this point, we're going to open it up to, well, we can give a little love first. Woo! So at this point, we're gonna open things up to Q&A, and certainly we can talk about, well, just about anything, I think. So if you have questions, I think this microphone ought to be more accessible, so I'm going to make it more accessible. You can also grab my microphone. So if you have any questions, you can come grab this mic, or you can raise your hand and I can get you a microphone. Yes. That was really loud, I'm sorry.
Hi, Boots.
Hey.
So a few of us met before, and we talked about how you used your art to try to make a difference with protesting and bringing those politics into your art. And I'm curious how burgeoning artists and poets and writers and musicians, like many of us, can begin to do that and begin to make changes with our art.
I came out of a movement. I probably would have wanted to do some sort of art in any way, but I think what makes my art relevant and what gives me a spark to do things in an interesting way has to do with my particular ideas about what needs to be done. And that being said, my particular ideas about what needs to be done comes only from the experience of being involved in organizations. So I would say that the first step is join an organization and get involved in actually trying to get people to get involved in a campaign, because that gives you a real idea of where people are at. Otherwise, we can kind of think like, people in this area feel this way about that, and people in that area, and we have these things that we make our art about. We talked about this earlier. I have a lot of friends that do make political art. All art is political, but make stuff that is about the need for social change, and their whole approach is that people need to get angry, and that their art is angry, and people need to be fed up with the way things are. And so that's what they put in their music. And I believe that they put that in their music because they don't have a background in organizing. And that actually comes from not really having a knowledge of what gets people involved in stuff. And I would disagree that anger gets people involved in stuff. I think anger is maybe part of things, because if you know how things are working, you may at some point get angry about it. But the biggest hurdle is people feeling like they have the ability to do anything about it. And part of your job as an organizer is to show them that they do. And in those conversations, you get involved in how people feel powerless and how people see the system is working, which goes back to the explanation of how the system works that I believe that people need to get back to, that the left needs to re-embrace. The left avoiding class struggle and class analysis has caused us to come up with all kinds of crazy shit. Like, it's not right-wingers that are explaining, that it's not total right-wingers that have been explaining violence in black communities as having to do with culture. There's many liberals that came out of things that were at one time left, very left and progressive. And you come up with that analysis that culture causes violence because you're avoiding talking about poverty and that how this system must have a certain number of unemployed people in order to survive. You can't have full employment in this system, because if you do, everybody could demand whatever wage they want. You have to have an army of unemployed workers to keep wages down. Point blank, that's how this system works. So unemployed people have to eat. And that means illegal business. And illegal business, just like legal business, uses violence to regulate itself. I mean, if you have a store down the street, you can't walk out with groceries without paying, because you'll be met with a physical force. Either that'll be store security, that'll be the police, whatever. And that physical force may take you to jail, may beat you up, may kill you. It may just simply return the groceries. But there's a physical force that regulates legal business, and that's the police. Illegal business can only regulate it with themselves. Can't go to court and say, Your Honor, I was supposed to get a whole key of cocaine, and this is clearly 70% baking soda. I demand restitution. If you could, it would be the police that would enforce that. Give this man back his cocaine. And so all business uses, I mean, even in zoning laws, like some supermarket can't come in here and start doing construction, not only because of the paper that Beloit College owns this and zoning laws and other things, somebody has to physically stop them. So all business regulation relies on physical force to make it happen. And to a larger extent, you can talk about international trade, things like that, and the armies that are used to enforce those things. But if you have an illegal business, you can't zone how many dope dealers need to be here or whatever. That's all done through yourselves. And that's what the violence is for the immense part. Then there are other cultural things that come from that. Cultural things that come out of how we survive. That's what culture is. What culture is created from how we survive. Fishing villages, they create fishing songs. They don't create agricultural songs. You try to get a fishing village to sing an agricultural song, They might like it, but they're not going to start digging up the ground. They're a fishing village. That's how they survive. So, if you want to change culture, you have to change the economics behind the culture, the ways people survive. But what I'm saying, a lot of y'all are probably like, yeah, okay, economics 101. But even the left has abandoned this. So many people work in nonprofit organizations who are like, we're going to stop violence by teaching people how to dress better. Or we're going to teach people to shake hands and talk to each other nicer, and that's how we're going to stop violence. And in order to get the money to do these things, they have to go shout out ridiculous things about how violence comes to the black community. And this is all because they want to avoid class analysis. When we had Occupy Oakland, there was a big conflict that happened. And some of it was about the name, but part of it was that when you have a lot of groups come together to do something, and it's kind of a coalition, and they're doing something in a new way, eventually people start trying to tend towards going back to their old way of doing things. If you used to just be at home smoking weed, and you've been involved in this movement, after a while, you're kind of like, I wish I was just home smoking weed. I want to do that. If you were in an organization that was a radical organization that never worked with any unions before, you kind of like come up with an argument of why you need to do that. And if you're a nonprofit organization that has been working around stop the violence for a long time, you're going to come up with a reason to come do that. So I think that, so one of the charges was that Occupy Oakland wasn't dealing with the needs of the black community. Meanwhile, Occupy Oakland had the most black folks of any organization I've been in the Bay Area, and that's from multiracial radical groups to all black radical groups, you know, and people joined because we put out this idea that we were going to start to try to make social change through some way of stopping profit. Now, it wasn't exactly what I was talking about because we were stopping it from the outside, blocking the ports and all that sort of stuff. But people saw it as something viable, like, wow, okay, they're saying they're going to stop profit and be able to demand what they want from those powers by saying, you know, we're stopping profit until you get that back. So just that idea, I think, brought a lot of people out. 50,000 people came and participated openly in the general strike. And we had more black folks that had ever been involved in stuff because we dealt with things on an economic level. And for the past, at least all throughout the 90s that I have been involved, a lot of these problems were dealt with, like I said, like, okay, we've got this violence in the community, and it's, meanwhile, well, let me take a tangent on that. The idea that violence in black communities is a big problem is something that also many liberals have spouted out, and even people consider themselves progressive, and sometimes people, you know, consider themselves radical because we believe it. I even believed it. But the truth is, if you look at statistics, CDC statistics show that black homicide was 1/3 more in 1950 than it was in 2013. It was 75% more in 1970 than it was in 2013. Meaning from 1950 to 1970, the black homicide rate went up. And then from 1970 to 2013, it went down. During the 80s, we got, for those of you who were there, we got bombarded with this idea about Crips and Bloods, Crips and Bloods. And in Chicago, they had the other thing, I forget what it's called. And we got bombarded with, oh, these kids are going crazy. Turns out in the 80s, during that time, there was way less violence in the black community than there was in the 50s. Turns out right now, because of all of the bombarding about supposed black violence, then let's put it like this, because sometimes I say those statistics and people are like, well, it doesn't matter that it's less than the 50s because violence in the black community is still 10 times more than the white community. And that is true, only if you lump in places like Bel Air and Beverly Hills with poor white folks in Memphis or whatever, but that's not really how the world works. Studies show that if you compare black neighborhoods with white neighborhoods of the same exact income level, the crime rate is the same. So, but we've gotten, and a lot of times, you know, it'd be different probably if it was just like Donald Trump saying these things. People would like take it with a grain of salt and immediately combat it. But because certain sections of what we consider left, liberal, progressive, have come out with these for the past, come out with these ideas for the past 20, 30 years, we kind of believe it and we figure out how can we work around this problem. And really, it's a shell game. That really isn't the problem. I mean, it's a problem anytime someone gets killed because they didn't need to, but that problem doesn't exist more in the black community than it does in the white community. And but we've been misguided, and part of it is that people were so willing to put that idea out there because it made for some explanation of violence that had nothing to do with the class analysis around poverty, around economic exploitation. So you have all these people putting this out for all that time, and because that's not what Occupy Oakland was dealing with, was saying, okay, we need to stop the violence. It was said, okay, Occupy Oakland is not dealing with the problems of the black community. And the problems of the black community were spelled out as black on black violence. And so these explanations for how things work end up coming from this idea that we need to run away from this class analysis. And sometimes people run away from the class analysis because they say, well, you know, that's fine if you're from a liberal college or you're from, you know, the Bay Area, or you're from New York, or you're from Chicago, or we know Atlanta is a little bit more progressive than, or Austin, or, you know, wherever you are and you say this, they're like, it's different somewhere else. It's more right wing wherever you go. You know, and that's really the media's goal, is to make you think that you're the most radical person in the room and nobody else is down with you. And Occupy showed that to not be true. But, and so that's part of the argument, is like, people aren't down with this. But as I said, the US has a radical history. There's but it's always told, a lot of that is kept from us, in part to make us feel like that nobody agrees with anything radical. So we even change what we say and what we do based on our ability, our perceived ability to interact with people if we put out these radical ideas. Oh, sorry.
Hi. So going off of that, a lot of us in this room are students who are dealing with a lot of fear, who are anxiously struggling to join a workforce that mistreats and underpays and underemploys people. And I'm wondering how you empower people to do this kind of protest when people are already so afraid of losing their jobs.
Yeah, that's definitely an age-old question, and the first question that always comes up, and it makes sense. I think probably, even though I've done some support of labor struggles in my life, and help to organize some stuff. I think that the main thing that you would start with is bringing people here that have done that, right? Because their answers are going to be more detailed about, like, here's the thing that worked here, and but it works. People are able to do it. People are, and often the idea is like, well, this particular job is more precarious than others because people can get fired and turned over. But that has been the case in many situations. The longshoremen on the West Coast were thought of as being like a lower classification of work than janitors. They were easy to turn over, thought of as not being skilled, and it had been said, and I'm talking, at the beginning of the 20th century, but it had been said there's no way to organize them, and they don't have any unity because they kind of get hired, in this group and this and that. But, and it was hard, and they actually had to fight tanks in order to do it. But to this day, they're the most militant, militant and most radical labor organization in the United States. That doesn't mean they're quite revolutionary, but they're on the scale of unions, they're the most militant and most radical. They shut down the West Coast for Mumia, things like that. But so many jobs are said to be too hard to organize. In New Zealand, they have a fast food workers union, and that just came about in the last 5 years, and they had the same problems. So there's ways to get around it. I don't have the answers to it, but it's something that comes from practice, and that is a fear that people have. And I think in general, the way you get around those fears are in groups. Like, someone acting on their own, it's going to be hard. When we started an initiative to have before the SEIU did this stuff, during Occupy Oakland, we started an initiative to do a fast food workers union, Occupy Oakland Fast Food Workers Union, where in it, we passed out flyers and we got a lot of interest from the workers there, because even with the bad press that we had, what we had been known for is being able to shut something down with numbers, being able to occupy stuff. So we had a flyer saying, look, we're going to start, we want to help folks organize this union, and the guarantee that you won't get messed with at work is that if they fire someone because they've been organizing, or we know that that's why they fired, or we think that, we'll shut down that McDonald's, that KFC, will occupy it, and they can't take that, So we knew that our whole goal was going to have to be to organize enough stores to be able to renegotiate the contract between the corporation and the franchise owner. But the point is that everybody was excited about it because they were like, oh, hell yeah, Occupy Oakland can easily shut us down. And at the time we could. That wouldn't be able to work now. But that's one of the things, is being able to have enough support to shut something down in the midst of getting retaliated on for organizing at work.
Yeah, so there's this idea of having permission to do a rally in order for it to be effective and not to be met by intervention by police, right? So could you give us a perspective on, like, the contradicting of the idea of getting a permission for a rally and for a rally to be kind of economically or financially, like, abrupting or to stop economic profit with a rally that's given permission to?
Yeah, I would say every situation is very different, and there's no one size fit all for that. But I would say, like, if you're going to have a strike, you're not getting permission to have a strike. So those types of things you won't be able to get permission for. But maybe it's, or maybe there's a shutdown that's in support of a strike that's happening where people are coming, and it starts off as a permitted rally but does something else. But as soon as you do that thing where you're stopping business, it's not a permitted rally anymore anyway. But I can't speak to the particular tactic of each thing. It could be useful sometimes to get a permit, but doesn't necessarily mean it is. I think that the things that would I think that the things that would be able to stop profit definitely would not be able to get a permit. However, what that comes from, what's the build up to that? Like maybe you have to have some rallies somewhere to get people from this particular workforce to know about what's going on. I don't, so there's no way to like put a blanket rule or idea of how you approach it. It all comes to being different things. I could imagine in certain cases where you may have to get, there may be immigrant labor involved, and some, you may know that, oh, this one work section of folks might not want to come if, it's permitted. And so we want to do one like this and then this other one like that. Who knows? So it's like hard to say in general what it is without talking about the specifics of that. And also without without being there. Like you are there and part of it. I'm assuming it sounds like you're talking about one particular thing.
Yeah,
So,
I just kind of want to get like if you've ever been like in a permissive rally and not permissive rally.
I've never organized a permitted rally, but I've organized unpermitted rallies, and we've chosen to take part in rallies that were permitted. And each time it's really just weighing out all sorts of things. But I understand that, it all depends on the particular situation.
So I think we've got time for one more question here, and then I think we'll let Boots go and have an evening. Do you have a couple copies of Tell Homeland Security with you?
I left them at the lodge.
Oh.
If people are going out to drink, I'll bring it.
All right.
And you can buy it from me.
All right. All right. So I actually had a question about language, as it were. So going back to what you said a little bit about in the 20s, communists were known, they were welcomed, kind of. And
I'm not saying that like that. I mean, there was a much bigger force. I mean, population of the United States was only 100 and something million, and there was 1 million card-carrying communists, which meant they had a bigger support, way bigger support than that. But, welcomed by who? Definitely not by the government, and definitely but yeah,
Right.
They had a stronger base in the working class. Let's
yeah,
say that.
exactly. And then in the 40s and 50s came the Red Scare and the national hysteria about that kind of, and they were called more Stalinist and Marxist than you heard communist. And my question about that is,
I don't think the term Stalinist started coming up until after that, but
until after.
Till much later. It didn't start being called that in the Stalinist. That wasn't really an epithet used in the 50s that much.
But what I meant with that, though, is that you kind of saw more hostility when they said Stalinist and Marxist than when they said communist. And what I wanted to kind of tie in with that is you use language a lot to spread your message and to kind of fight your battle. How important do you think language is in doing that a little bit, if that makes sense?
I think language is very important. I think that sometimes people use language to try to disassociate themselves with things that they don't want to critique or own themselves. So I'm not this, I'm that, And I find this with a lot of friends that are anarcho-socialists. Like, hey, I'm an anarcho-socialist. All that stuff does not apply to me, right? Meaning as if the radical history of the left could somehow be the same and unaffected right now in the present by there not having been revolutions where millions of people led upheavals and took power in where they were. That as if they're not connected to the mistakes and the victories of that. So whoever you are connected to those mistakes and those victories. The question is, what kind of a world do you want to make from now? And so me, I say that I'm a communist, and what that sometimes draws from friends of mine who are radicals but would not call themselves a communist is, oh, Boots Riley is a Stalinist. And what they mean by that is that I say, yeah, the Soviet Union actually did achieve a few things that are worth looking at, you know. And China was the greatest expression of community organizing that there could have ever been, right? Things like that. That doesn't say they didn't make really fucked up mistakes along the way. But what that does is make me have to look at what I'm doing right now, because I don't want to repeat those mistakes. However, many radicals who say, I'm not of that, even though they're trying to do the same thing, but I'm going to call myself something different, a lot of times they allow themselves to repeat those same mistakes because they don't have to interrogate themselves on what they're doing, right? So in particular cases where I've launched critiques of people that even were friends, but launched critiques where, you know, I'm saying I didn't think that was the right thing, blah, 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 this and that. And sometimes those things can be divisive, and sometimes maybe I could have made mistakes in how I worded things. But in a couple of those situations, folks that were like, oh, we're non-hierarchical and we're not of that same tradition, they were going around like telling people like, hey, if you agree with him on this publicly, you're not going to have any friends. We're not going to talk to you, and you're going to have to move, you know, that sort of thing. People ended up in tears, doing things that they claim, you know, but folks that attach themselves to some of the victories of the past, you know, are supposed to be the only ones that have to interrogate themselves about doing that. We all have to make sure that we don't fall into any of the mistakes of the past, but we also have to make sure that we can create a society in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. Now, how do we do that? That's something, you know, whereas the Zapatistas say we make the road while walking, but we also have to look at history. We also have to look at what has worked and what hasn't. And by work, I don't mean the general thing like, oh, this is over with and that, but like specific things. What didn't work? And also keeping in mind that things can be new. Like, I know when Occupy first came along, I was like, what the fuck is this? I was in New York, and they asked me to go and look at it and speak about it on TV. And I was like, I'm not speaking about it because it just seemed like it was a bunch of hippies that didn't have any questions or any answers. And that was my viewpoint of it at the time. And it was because it didn't fit the textbook picture of how I thought that a mass revolutionary movement should look at the beginning. We got these pictures from history of how, and one thing that, and even when I got involved with it, there were certain tactics and strategies that I would have said, no, that doesn't make sense. Like when the idea was first brought up, hey, maybe in 1 week we should have a general strike. I was like, 1 week to organize a general strike? That doesn't make any sense. But I learned, and I ended up being one of the public faces of calling for it, but while being skeptical about it, but I learned from people that were like, hey, this is something new. We're doing something, you know. So the bad part of being like, this is something new and none of that applies is you don't use that to look at yourself. But the good part about it is you don't get caught up in saying that things can't work. You have a bigger imagination about what could happen, and a lot of good things come with that.
All right, I'd like us to thank Boots for doing this, and thank you for coming. And yeah, and have yourself a fantastic evening.
And I was told that we're going for drinks somewhere after this. I don't know where.